February 26, 1945. Hill 382, Iwo Jima. The dawn sky was a harsh grey, the sun barely breaking through the smoke-laden horizon. The air was thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and scorched earth. Every footstep across the jagged, cratered terrain echoed against the mountain like a drumbeat of impending battle. Marines crouched behind shattered rock formations, their helmets smeared with mud, their uniforms torn and stained from the relentless advance. Among them, Private First Class Douglas Jacobson gripped his M1A1 bazooka tightly, the cold metal biting into his gloved hands, his heart pounding like a war drum against his ribs. The morning had begun like any other in the hellish grind of Iwo Jima. Orders were shouted over the roar of artillery. But amid the chaos, Jacobson's bazooka team had been struck down by a sudden burst of Japanese fire. Smoke curled into the sky as their bodies hit the ground, leaving the heavy launcher and a set of rockets abandoned. The rules were clear. Bazookas were two-man weapons, one to load, one to fire. Marines who attempted otherwise were courting certain death. But Jacobson didn't have time to think about protocol. The enemy positions loomed ahead, machine gun nests and reinforced bunkers bristling with rifles and mortar. Every second he delayed meant more lives at risk. Jacobson's eyes scanned the battlefield with laser focus. Craters pocked the terrain, each one a potential death trap. Debris from shells and shrapnel littered the path, and the moans of wounded Marines rose over the gunfire like a grim chorus. Around him, the others hesitated, frozen by the sheer ferocity of the Japanese defenses. But something inside him surged, a mix of raw instinct, honed training, and an unwavering sense of duty. Without a word, he grabbed the M1A1 launcher and the 4 rockets lying at his feet. The weight was unfamiliar on his shoulder, heavier than it should have been for one man to carry, yet manageable. Measured gasps. He began moving forward, slow at first, eyes darting, body low, every muscle coiled. The first shot was a test, a measured launch that obliterated the nearest bunker's entrance. Wood splintered, stone crumbled, and the first wave of Japanese defenders fell silent. The other Marines, seeing this display, caught a glimpse of something they hadn't seen before: audacity coupled with precision. Jacobson's momentum carried him forward, each shot timed with meticulous calculation, each movement a dance with death across the deadly landscape of Hill 382. This was no longer about procedure or safety. It was about speed, improvisation, and survival. As Jacobson advanced, the wind carried the distant explosions and the screams of battle to his ears, each one sharpening his focus. In those moments, he was not just a Marine. He was the spearhead of an assault, a solitary force confronting a fortified enemy. The ground trembled under the artillery, the smell of smoke and burning wood thickened, and the morning light struggled to pierce the pall of destruction. Yet he pressed on, each step closer to the bunkers, a testament to courage that defied the rigid rules of warfare. Jacobson moved with a relentless, almost unnatural pace, keeping low to avoid the concentrated bursts of Japanese rifle fire. The bazooka was cumbersome in his hands, the recoil powerful, the loading process designed for 2 men, yet he adapted with astonishing speed. He loaded a rocket, sighted down the launcher, and fired. The nearest bunker erupted, stone and timber raining down in clouds of dust and smoke. The ground shook, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he ducked behind a jagged outcrop, reloaded, and fired again. 1 shot became 2, 2 became 3, and the defenders began to realize they were facing not a team, but a single Marine with unstoppable determination. The Japanese had fortified their positions with careful precision, interlocking fields of fire designed to repel waves of attackers. Yet Jacobson exploited gaps in their formation with uncanny intuition. Moving from crater to shattered rock, each position struck before the enemy could regroup. He fired a rocket, and the bunker's roof collapsed in a cascade of splintered wood. He charged forward under covering fire from fellow Marines, though none dared approach too close. Each explosion sent fragments into the air, a storm of death and debris that tested both nerve and skill as the minutes ticked by. Jacobson's movements became almost a rhythm. Fire, reload, advance, fire again. He dodged mortar shells, rolled into shallow depressions to avoid machine gun bursts, and used every ounce of terrain to his advantage. The other Marines, inspired and stunned, began to follow his lead, picking up weapons that had been designed for teams and using them solo. Jacobson's audacity was contagious. His speed created momentum. His improvisation taught lessons that no manual could convey. He was redefining the rules of engagement in real time, turning what was considered suicidal into a calculated assault that crushed the enemy's defenses. By the end of the first 10 minutes, 3 Japanese positions had fallen. By 20 minutes, the number had climbed to 10. The defenders, who had once fired with confidence, now scrambled for cover, confused and demoralized by the relentless, precise strikes from this lone Marine. Every bunker destroyed was a psychological blow, each explosion amplifying Jacobson's presence across the battlefield. Hill 382, notorious for its merciless resistance, was beginning to feel the weight of a single Marine's courage, and those watching realized that history was being rewritten in real time, one rocket at a time. As Jacobson pressed deeper into the enemy's stronghold, the battlefield grew even more chaotic. Smoke hung thick over Hill 382, obscuring vision and turning the morning light into a dim, grey haze. The sharp cracks of rifle fire and the deep booms of artillery blended into a deafening symphony of war. Yet, in the midst of this hell, Jacobson moved with an eerie precision. Each step, each shot, was deliberate. His face, smeared with soot and sweat, reflected focus rather than fear, his eyes scanning for movement, for the slightest hint of the enemy's position. It was here, midway through the assault, that the first real challenge arose. A cluster of bunkers, reinforced with steel plating and sandbags, stood as a fortress atop the hill. Japanese soldiers poured out sustained fire, machine guns rattling like thunder. For a moment, even Jacobson hesitated, assessing the near-impossible task before him. Then he adjusted his stance, cradled the bazooka on his shoulder, and fired a rocket directly into the strongest bunker. The explosion shook the hillside, flinging debris across the terrain, and the defenders momentarily froze, stunned by the sheer force of the attack. Without pause, he moved to the next position, leaping from crater to crater under the relentless hail of bullets. His tactics were unconventional. He loaded rockets quickly, fired from unexpected angles, and used the terrain's natural cover to approach each bunker like a predator stalking prey. Other Marines began to mimic his style, picking up bazookas and grenades, their hesitation replaced by newfound audacity. Jacobson had turned fear into momentum, creating a wave of energy that surged across Hill 382 in the span of 30 minutes. 16 Japanese bunkers lay in ruins. What had once seemed an impossible solo effort had been executed with terrifying efficiency. Each explosion was a testament to the power of initiative, speed, and courage under fire. As the dust settled, the surviving defenders scattered, their morale shattered by the relentless, unorthodox assault of a single Marine. The hill, long considered a fortress, had been breached not by numbers, but by one man who refused to wait for protocol. One man who understood that action, not procedure, dictated survival. As the smoke cleared and the echoes of explosions faded, Hill 382 bore the scars of combat craters, pocked the earth, splintered timbers littered the slope, and the silence was broken only by distant artillery and the groans of the wounded. Amid this devastation stood PFC Douglas Jacobson, chest heaving, helmet dented, uniform torn, but unbowed. His bazooka, now scorched and streaked with mud, rested on his shoulder, a silent witness to a feat that would become legend among the Marines. Around him, fellow soldiers emerged from cover, eyes wide with awe and respect. They had witnessed not just the destruction of fortified positions, but the raw embodiment of courage, innovation, and relentless determination. Jacobson's actions that morning did more than secure Hill 382. They reshaped the mindset of those around him. Marines who had once strictly adhered to manuals began improvising, learning that sometimes survival demanded breaking the rules. Orders and protocol were important, but initiative and courage were invaluable. Tales of his solo assault spread quickly through the ranks, and his name became synonymous with daring ingenuity under fire. He had taken a weapon designed for two, operated it alone, and in doing so, destroyed 16 enemy positions in just 30 minutes. It was a record of audacity that would be remembered long after the battle ended. For the young men of the 4th Marine Division, the meat grinder of Hill 382 had become more than a battlefield. It was a proving ground for courage. Jacobson's bravery was a reminder that in war, the line between life and death often hinges on the willingness to act when others hesitate. The hill had been taken, and the Japanese defenses shattered. But the true victory lay in the lesson he imparted. Courage is contagious, momentum can defy protocol, and one individual, when driven by resolve, can change the course of battle. Even decades later, military historians would study the assault, analyzing how a single Marine, armed with nothing but determination and a two-man bazooka, altered the tactics of his peers and achieved what had seemed impossible. Hill 382 was a monument not only to the ferocity of battle, but to the extraordinary heroism of Douglas Jacobson. His story endures, a timeless testament to the power of initiative, the daring of the human spirit, and the indomitable will of those who fight not just with weapons, but with courage itself. By now, the morning had descended into a maelstrom of smoke, dust, and fire. Hill 382, once a daunting fortress of interlocking Japanese bunkers and machine gun nests, had become a landscape of devastation, punctuated by explosions and the relentless crackle of gunfire. PFC Douglas Jacobson, moving with unwavering determination, had already destroyed 10 bunkers in less than 20 minutes. The remaining positions, however, were heavily reinforced, dug deep into the hillside, surrounded by barbed wire and deadly fields of fire. Many would have considered this an impossible task for a single Marine armed with a bazooka. Yet Jacobson saw only opportunity. He crouched behind a shattered rock outcrop, his chest heaving from exertion, sweat mixing with mud on his face. His hands, blistered from the repeated loading of rockets, gripped the M1A1 with a precision that only hours of intense combat could forge. He surveyed the final cluster of bunkers, noting the angles of fire, the placement of mortar, and the gaps in the defenders' coverage. Then, with a deep breath, he sprinted from cover to cover, advancing like a storm across the jagged terrain. Each step was calculated, each movement measured to minimize exposure, but the speed of his assault kept the Japanese off balance. The first of the final bunkers exploded under his rocket fire, the impact sending splinters of timber and jagged stone flying in all directions. The enemy soldiers, stunned by the audacity and precision of a lone Marine, scrambled desperately to regroup. Jacobson didn't pause. He rolled into the next crater, loaded another rocket, and fired again. The explosion echoed across the hillside, shaking the very earth beneath him. Smoke swirled around his face, mingling with the scent of cordite and burning wood. Yet his focus never wavered. Other Marines watched in awe as he moved from bunker to bunker, each attack faster than the last, each shot perfectly timed. The defenders, once confident in their fortified positions, were now in chaos. Some fled, some tried to return fire, but none could match the relentless pace of Jacobson's assault. By now, 16 Japanese bunkers had been destroyed in just 30 minutes, a feat no one had thought possible. His improvisation, speed, and courage had transformed what should have been a suicidal task into a calculated, unstoppable offensive, as the last bunker collapsed in a cloud of smoke and dust. Jacobson paused for the first time in over half an hour. His chest heaved, muscles screaming from exhaustion, yet a fierce pride burned in his eyes. Around him, fellow Marines began to advance, inspired by his example, picking up weapons designed for teams and wielding them solo, just as he had done. Hill 382 had fallen not simply through brute force, but through the audacity and initiative of a single Marine willing to defy protocol and trust his own judgment. The battlefield was now silent, save for distant artillery and the groans of the wounded. Jacobson stood atop the ruined hill, the weight of the M1A1 heavy on his shoulder, his gaze sweeping across the destruction he had wrought. Every shattered bunker was a testament not just to firepower, but to courage, ingenuity, and unrelenting determination. In those 30 minutes, he had done the impossible, single-handedly assaulting 16 enemy positions, demonstrating that sometimes the rules of war are less important than the will to act. As the smoke and dust began to settle over Hill 382, the full scale of what had just occurred became clear. The Japanese defenses, once thought impenetrable, lay in ruins, their machine gun nests destroyed and their bunkers reduced to rubble. PFC Douglas Jacobson, chest heaving and uniform torn, stood amid the wreckage, his M1A1 bazooka still in hand. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke, gunpowder, and the raw tang of battle. Around him, fellow Marines cautiously advanced, eyes wide with awe and newfound respect, realizing that a single man had achieved what an entire team had been deemed necessary to accomplish. Jacobson's actions that day went far beyond mere destruction of enemy positions. They shifted the mindset of the Marines around him. The rigid protocols, the manuals that had dictated every action on the battlefield, suddenly seemed less important in the face of audacity, speed, and decisive initiative. Others began to pick up bazookas and crew weapons on their own, inspired by the example set by one young Marine. Hill 382, known as the meat grinder, had been conquered not by sheer numbers, but by courage, ingenuity, and relentless momentum. The 30-minute assault became legend. Military reports later chronicled the extraordinary feat. 16 bunkers destroyed, 1 Marine operating a weapon designed for 2, and the morale of his fellow soldiers transformed in real time. His name, Douglas Jacobson, was etched into the history of the 4th Marine Division as a symbol of individual heroism under the most extreme conditions. For the Marines who fought alongside him, and for the generations that studied the battle, Hill 382 became a testament to the idea that initiative and courage can alter the course of combat, that one determined individual can tip the balance of a deadly fight, even decades later. Historians would return to the morning of February 26, 1945, as an example of audacity in war. Jacobson's approach, blending instinct, training, and sheer determination, demonstrated that bravery is not simply measured by following orders, but by knowing when to act decisively against overwhelming odds. Hill 382 had been secured, the Japanese defenses shattered, and a legend was born. A lone Marine, armed with nothing but a bazooka and indomitable will, had rewritten the rules of engagement through courage and relentless action in the end. The legacy of Douglas Jacobson was not only in the bunkers destroyed or the territory gained, but in the inspiration he left behind. Marines who witnessed his assault carried the lesson forward, that individual initiative, when paired with skill and determination, could achieve the impossible. Hill 382, once a fortress of fear, now stood as a monument to one Marine's extraordinary heroism, a reminder that courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to yield can turn a solitary soldier into a force capable of changing history.